Morning, brethren. We come this morning in our daily devotions to continue on looking at what Paul has to say in Philippians 1, verses 12 and following. He has said to the church in Philippi that he wants them to know that what has happened to him, and that was a catalogue of adversity, but he doesn't actually go into the details. He just puts it into that general context. What has happened to me has worked out for the furtherance of the gospel. Here this morning we see Paul's primary concern. We thought yesterday a little bit about his personal circumstances. What is Paul's primary concern in the midst of all that he's experiencing in life? Well, the Philippians were worried about Paul. They wanted to know how he was. But Paul does something wonderful in his reply to the concerns of these fellow believers. He draws the focus of their thoughts and their attention away from him and his personal circumstances, and he centers their thoughts instead upon the cause of Christ, the cause of the gospel. It's as though Paul is saying, look, folks, I know that you love me. I know that you're really concerned about me. Epaphroditus' visit, the gifts that you sent me, these are clear evidence of that, and I'm really touched by your concern. But listen, at the end of the day, how I am faring isn't really that important. The real issue is, the really important thing is, how is the gospel doing? And you know what? I want to tell you that it is doing great. The things that have happened to me have actually served to advance the gospel. The gospel was making progress. And as far as Paul was concerned, that was what really mattered. Not how he was, not his personal circumstances, not his own comfort, but the cause of Christ was advancing. This was Paul's primary concern, the progress of the gospel. And in verse 18, when he says, I rejoice, the reason for his rejoicing is Christ is being preached. Now, he was suffering as a result not only of being imprisoned, but if you read on in that passage, you'll see that some people in the Church of Rome were actually trying to make capital out of the fact that Paul was in prison by taking the opportunity to preach the gospel in such a way as to make themselves more popular, to promote their own agenda. Maybe their noses were being put out of joint whenever Paul arrived in Rome, and he was getting all the attention. We don't know. But Paul isn't worried about that. Paul doesn't care so much about their motives, although their motives should have been pure. What Paul is really concerned about is Christ is being preached, and in that I rejoice. Paul's primary concern was the advancement of the gospel. His whole outlook in life wasn't self-centered, it was Christ-centered. And because it was Christ-centered, and because the gospel was going forward, even though he was suffering, he was able to rejoice. Later on in this letter, he's going to be able to say, for me to live is Christ. And this is clear to see here. Sometimes our suffering means that the gospel will advance, because in the midst of our suffering, we get opportunities to speak for Christ that we would not otherwise have had. Paul could have moaned about the fact that he was in jail, but he didn't, because it gave him opportunity to preach the gospel to people he would otherwise not have met. And it also, as we're going to see tomorrow, encouraged others to preach the gospel. And surely we should look at any hardships that we go through in the way that Paul looked at them. Maybe you have to go into hospital for an illness or an operation or whatever. There'll be people that you'll meet in hospital and you'll be able to witness to that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to witness to. Our circumstances, no matter how hard they are opportunities for us to show our faith in God and opportunities to share the gospel with other people. So Paul's primary concern is not so much himself and how he's doing. His primary concern is the advancement of the gospel. May God help us to be able to put things into a proper perspective, and in doing so, to honour him. Have a good day, folks.